All right, so Exodus 18 simply says, the next day, Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people. And they stood around him from morning till evening. Verse 14 says, when his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he says, what is this you're doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, while all these people stand around you from morning till evening? Moses answered him, because the people come to me to seek God's will. Haven't you been in those places where it's like, well, this is God's work. The people need me. The scripture continues to say, whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions. Moses' father-in-law replied, what you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will wear yourselves out. Listen, we're talking about Black history, but I still think there's somebody here that needs to hear that. Stop wearing yourself out from all these people. It says that the work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Listen now to me, and I will give you some advice. And may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Teach them his decrees and instructions, and show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave. But select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases they can decide themselves. All right. And so with that for today, I just wanted to show you one example of, as we're talking about Black history, one example of someone in the Bible with Black ancestry that was great for political leadership, was great for support, was also amazing when it came to saying, hey, it's not to say that you're not doing good work, but oftentimes when it comes to delegating and helping people, doing something that is good is not always the same as doing something that is best. Is it good to help everybody? In theory, to be a good person, a good Christian? Absolutely. But is it best? Does it mean that someone has to suffer? Does it mean that your health has to suffer in the process? Does it mean that your family has to suffer in the process? And so ultimately, as we look, this is just the beginning as we look at different people in the Bible, that Jethro, being of Black ancestry, was a part of this lineage. And so with that, before we get into the 1619 project, Donyelle is going to start us off with a little question today, and I will drop it in the chat as well.
All right, so our first question for today is, I actually have it too, Devonte, if you,
Okay,
yeah,
you can drop it in there then.
I'll drop it. Okay, so growing up on a scale of 1 to 10, how well did your family teach you about slavery and African American history? How well did your school teach you? So once again, growing up on a scale of 1 to 10, how well did your family teach you about slavery and African American history? And how well did your school teach you?
And feel free to use that raise hand feature, and also comment in the chat if you would like to start us off for today. All right, first person up. Don, who do we have?
Natalie.
Hi everyone. On a scale of 1 to 10, I feel like with my family, I will say it's a 5 because my parents are from Haiti. So I learned more about like slavery in the Haitian context. Um, and my dad was like pretty knowledgeable about it, but I think the way he talked about it was like more of the lens of like it's Haitians' fault for the position that they're in instead of more so blaming the people who were oppressing them. And then with school, I'll say a little better, like 7, because I think I learned a lot, but like when I had a certain like high school teacher, um, he like was more in depth about it. And he was a white teacher, but because like he talked about how he grew up in a really racist household, so he like took the time to like unlearn all those things that his parents taught him, and then he was able to teach us like more things that you don't see in a textbook. So that's my answer.
All right. We have Stephanie next.
Okay, so for home, definitely would be a 7 because we constantly be reminded because my parents also came from Haiti, like how hard things were back then and this and that. And we used to watch the Roots movies and they would always point out, you see, you don't have to go through that. You see that? You gotta go to school so you know all of this. And then at school, I think it was much less. It was like from 1 to 10, I would rate it a 5. I didn't really, they didn't really talk about it that much in school. You know, they would mention here and there, but not really go into it. Not in school.
You know, Stephanie, before you go, it's so interesting that you say that it's almost like your parents were like, you see, that's why you have to go to school. As if like it almost sounds like as if like we were like we're the reason why we were placed, you know, or we're the reason why like slavery or these things happen. As if we put ourselves there. It's our faults. You know, not saying that they meant it like that, but um it's almost like it's as easy to just to say, hey, you know, if you work really hard, then you won't repeat the past. When in reality, we know that even those that work hard and even those that have tried to make a name for themselves or be successful, they are getting backlash, sometimes resistance because of the system itself. When other cultures don't experience those same racism, the same discrimination, and so on. So I thought that was very interesting. The certain comments that your parents would make.
Yeah, so, you know, and I think they meant it more in terms of like, see, without education,
Yeah.
like the slaves were back then, this is what they had to do. They had to work in the cotton, you know, fields and all of this. And because they didn't have education, just to stress how important education is.
Mm. Yeah, when in reality, it wasn't based off of like education, right? It was whether or not they had education or not, people are oppressing you. They're using you to build up economy, building using you for resources, using you for so many things. So I definitely just want to thank you for, you know, starting us off. Ashley, you're up.
Okay, so I would rate my parents as a 1 and maybe school as a 5. 1 for my parents because they really didn't teach me anything about slavery for a very long time. And we didn't even have conversations about it until I became an adult. And um I think part of it was because they immigrated from Haiti to here. So maybe part of it was just not really knowing the American history, like a lot about that. But even the history within their own country, they didn't really talk about. And there wasn't as much Haitian like sense of pride or a sense of like, being teaching their children about like where they come from and their roots and things like that. So that wasn't really necessarily a priority in the home. What was discussed was you need to do your part and as a Black person in America, you need to make sure that you are on top of everything, that you work twice as hard, that you show up and you meet all these, all these standards. For school, it depended on what professor or teacher that I had, but some would just kind of gloss over it as a check mark off, the curriculum for the year. Some people would just say it wasn't a big deal. Some people would be very dismissive about it. And to be honest, I never really encountered a teacher from like, kindergarten up until graduating high school that ever really taught us about Black history from a place of, I don't know, like just authentically, just to tell us what the history was, to be honest about the history, and to just empower us with that knowledge. So I never really had that experience, but at least they did mention it, a couple times. So yeah.
Yeah, wow, that is definitely real, and especially when you talk about even your parents, right? Like, oh, well, just make sure you work hard. And I realized that the Caribbean experience, like us growing up in Caribbean households, is also affects our lens of history. It's like I'm getting one thing from school, right? Then I'm getting like Black American, at the same time I'm getting like a Black American experience because I'm going to school and I'm with my peers and everything like that. And then at home, it's like I have that Jamaican, background and experience. And it's very, very interesting because you're battling almost like three different worlds. I remember like you said, Arshley, my mom telling me a very similar thing as if like, oh, well, a lot of Black Americans are lazy, right? That's how growing up, she would have that mindset. She doesn't have it now, but growing up, she would have that mindset of, oh, they're just lazy. They don't want to work hard. And, us Caribbeans, we know work ethic and everything like that. And I used to have to say to her, like, no, that's actually not the case. Yeah, you have a work ethic, but this country is racist. And there's systems in place to keep people down. And we're talking about multiple generations worth of oppression in terms of education and so on. And so just to make a blanket statement like that, you really have to educate even people that are way like older than you. Because it feels like it feels like it's a slap in the face. Like imagine years of slavery, 400 plus years of slavery, people enduring, people building up this country, people being forced from their places, and to have other Blacks that look like them to say that, hey, they're just lazy. They didn't really work hard enough. Like a part of the reason that made it easier for some of our Caribbean people to come is because of the work done by civil rights movement and so on. And so just to call them lazy, I had to, explain to her like that's not fair. That's definitely not fair. Obviously, she doesn't feel that way anymore. But this was a lot of the belief that some of our people coming from different islands had because they didn't necessarily go through the slavery that was experienced here in America or during right before Reconstruction and so on. And so just want to thank you so much for sharing that, Arshley. Anybody else? Hey, everyone that just jumped on. I'm going to say that question one more time, but oh, Lauren, you had a comment in the chat. She says, I would rate my parents with like a 6 because they didn't know too much about it. School was generally an 8, only because the history teacher was very passionate about it. No pressure, and you can put this in the chat too if you don't want to say it out loud. But when you talk about your school experience, do you remember specific stories that passionate teacher had basically shared with you during that time, during that school experience? Feel free to put it in the chat.
I can't remember anything specific, but she would. I grew up in Grenada.
Okay.
So she would, take us on field trips that weren't like supposed to happen, to different like plantations and, you know, slave pens and stuff, that she really emphasized like how things were, and to help build us up as, you know, Black kids in the Caribbean growing up. Like, yeah, to, how to say, like, this is what was done to your people, but you can thrive and change the trajectory of things in your own life. And you would face these obstacles because, you know, the other race, they have their mindset about you because of all of that. So yeah, it was great. Like, yeah, learning from her.
I'm impressed. By the way, Donyelle loved the fact that you were from Grenada because our family's from Grenada.
Oh,
Yeah.
sweet. Hey, let's go.
Oh my goodness. I love the fact that you had that experience and that she was bold enough to do it. And you said that like you went on field trips that you weren't necessarily supposed to go on. Was that what it is? Now explain that. Like when you said you weren't necessarily supposed to go on
It
those.
wasn't part of the curriculum. Like, you know, field trips weren't supposed to happen, but she made it an effort, like, to get us out to see those places and like be in those spaces that things happen.
Listen, kudos to that teacher. We need more of them to be passionate about adding things to the curriculum that should be added. I mean, this is your history. This affects you, you know, it affects future generations. And I'm really thank you so much for sharing that. Definitely an inspiration. Looking at Savi. Savi says down here that when she was in terms of rating family and school, 3 for family and 7 for school. Savi, just want to pick your brain. When you say 3 for family, if it's a 3, what was shared? If little was shared, what was exactly shared during your time growing up?
My parents were like too busy, for lack of better words, to really like share Black history, especially Black American history. Like my mom's an immigrant. My dad was born here, but like he was born here like kind of by accident, not even like a on purpose type thing. So they were pretty much raised in more of like Haitian culture versus Black American culture. So they didn't like know enough, and then they didn't have enough time to like share what they did know. But they were very big on. I'm sorry, I'm driving.
Oh, you're fine.
They were very big on me reading, and as a result, that's where I gained knowledge. So like, my mom wouldn't just like let me get any old book. So if I like picked like a book about mysteries, she's gonna force me to get history one.
Mm.
So as a result, I learned history like passively from her forcing me to go to the library and like do book reports and read stuff. But my school was, I would say, more intentional. It wasn't perfect because I went to a Catholic school that was kind of underfunded because it was really Black. But my principal, Miss Smith, was like super pro Black. So she felt like you had to know where you're coming from. You had to know like who you were and where you can go because of like knowing your past. So she always like ensured that we were learning about, you know, Black authors. If we had a music class, Black musicians. So she like really like did her best to like show us ourselves and all that we were learning. Just, you know, it was underfunded, so couldn't get like all of the supports.
Mm. Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, Savi, for that. And yeah, and that's a great transition to our topic for today, the 1619 project. And so as I talk about the 1619 project, I want to just let you know that the author is Nicole Hannah Jones. Nicole Hannah Jones. And it's that blue book. So whenever you see it, it's that blue book called the 1619 Project. And I've heard about it. I heard about it maybe 3 years ago. And I said to myself, one of these days, I'm going to read that book. But because I have too many stuff to read right now, I'm not going to touch it. But eventually I am. 3 years later, I was like, the 1619 Project, I'm ready to start reading it. And so this will be, I know, try the audiobook. I really got to start doing the audiobook. I think I only done an audiobook like once. Most time I just read mine because the audiobook I'm sometimes like listening and then I think about a song and then I forget what I'm listening to. But anyway, The 1619 Project, it's not something that's new in terms of the information, but it was something that was passionate to her, and it was a part of, I would call it unforgotten history. And so let me just share this with you, and I'm also going to share a video with you all from Nicole Hannah-Jones. But the premise of the 1619 Project, it says here that the first Africans brought to English North America were captured by the Portuguese during a time of war in Angola and placed on the Spanish slave ship in San Juan Bautista. Okay, so I'll just read that one more time. So it's based on the first Africans that were brought to English North America. They were captured by the Portuguese, and this was during a time of war in Angola, and they were placed on a Spanish slave ship in San Juan Bautista. The story goes on to say that British pirates, that's right, British pirates seized that ship during a fierce battle at sea and snatched the Africans on board off the coast of Mexico. Those Africans were then divided and placed on what they refer to as the White Lion and the Treasurer. And these Africans were brought to the colonies to be traded for food. The book goes on to say that it laid the foundation for a more expansion form of oppression, and that will become part of the fabric of a new nation. We just want to put a little stop right there for a second. Many people know about 1776 in terms of the Declaration of Independence, but a lot of people don't always recognize 1619. But if you know 1776, it's also important to know 1619, because the first time the Africans came over here, and this was in Jamestown, Virginia. As it continues to read, it says, at the start of the colonies, you have Africans that were stolen, treated like property, forced to work, and who were terrorized. How were we led to believe that for the last 400 years, that the point of landing for the African people was Jamestown? Two of the Africans brought to Virginia were Anthony and Isabel, who worked on the plantation of William Tucker. Without Blacks, there would be no Jamestown, and of course, no colonies. Blacks helped to build America. And so it's very important that even some people have kind of pushed back on this 1619 project, because the reality is that as we talk about the history, some people really want to talk about slavery as if, oh, why are we talking about the past? Slavery was so long ago. We're different now. Things have changed. That was our past, but we have made amends. But the author, Nicole Hannah-Jones, she wants us to realize that even at the beginning of this nation, even with the colonies, what this nation tried to put forth in terms of freedom, in terms of equal rights, was hypocrisy from the very beginning. That what they were putting out in terms of equal rights and freedom were only for a selective few. Even with the Declaration of Independence, she wants to point out that Thomas Jefferson owned 130 slaves. So in terms of our founding fathers' Declaration of Independence, when they were talking about people having equal rights and talking about this freedom, at the same time, you still own slaves. So make that make sense. And so in reality, she also was speaking about the fact that when it came to even the colonies and splitting from Britain wasn't about equal rights, wasn't about fair representation. She was like, a big part of splitting from Britain was about keeping slavery. And that's how she's gotten a lot of backlash, because a lot of people try to say, well, no, our beginning was about freedom, a part of our foundation. But in reality, she says from the very beginning, in words, you spoke freedom, but in actions, you were racist from the very beginning. And you benefited off the backs of slaves. And so just want to share with you before I share this video, this was a quote. As when Nicole Hannah-Jones, the author of this book, was a kid, she remembers growing up, not knowing much of her history. But one day she was in a class, kind of similar to your experience, Lorian. She was in a class with a teacher that was very passionate about Black history. And so this is the quote. She says, sitting in that class each day, I felt as if I had spent my entire life struggling to breathe. And someone had finally provided me with oxygen. I'll say that one more time. After having a couple of years of not knowing her history, she finally had a teacher that basically was teaching her African-American history and what her people had gone through. And she says that sitting in that class each day, I felt as if I had spent my entire life up until that point struggling to breathe, and someone had finally provided me with oxygen. I feel a pang of embarrassment now when I recall my surprise that so many books existed about Black people. And by Black people, that Black people had so much history that could be learned. I felt at once angry and empowered. And these dueling emotions drove an appetite for learning Black American history that has never left me. I began asking Mr. Dial, that was his name, for books to read beyond the assigned text, devouring them and then asking for others. And so I just want to get some feedback from you. As you think about 1619, the history that we just kind of briefly touched on, as I share this video, I want you to think about this question. What thoughts come to your mind? What emotions come to your mind? Did you know about 1619? I would just want your overall reaction. So with that, let me share the video as we as you're like just pondering those questions, okay? All right.
And congratulations on creating and working with a group of people on a project that has gone on to become more than just a moment, but rather a rethinking of America's history. Let's start with the why behind it. I mean, history seems like it has been. So why try and write it again?
Well, history has been written, but it's been written to tell us a certain story. And the 1619 Project is trying to reframe that story. And it's really about the ongoing legacy of slavery. We've been taught that slavery was a long time ago. Get over it, which is something nearly every Black person in this country hears at some point. And the 1619 Project is really saying that slavery was so foundational to America and its institutions that we are still suffering from that legacy now, and it's exploring the many ways that we still are.
It's interesting that you've chosen the year 1619 because many people would say, but this was before America existed. You know, why not start at America's founding and then not include the years before when this was a colony and Virginia and Britain were involved? So why do you choose that point? And why do you argue, more importantly, that on the 14th, you say on the 400th anniversary of this fateful moment, it is finally time to tell our story truthfully?
Yes, so it's funny because this year is also the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower. Yet no one argues that we shouldn't learn about the Mayflower because that predates the United States. We know that that was an important moment. I would argue that the White Lion, which was a ship that arrived a year earlier carrying enslaved Africans, was far more important to the American story than 1620, than the Mayflower. So no, America hadn't yet formed, but Virginia was the first colony. Our institutions would come out of the 13 colonies, our legal system, our cultural system, our political system, and certainly the anti-Black racism that we still struggle with is born at that moment.
When you start off in this magazine, there's a really beautiful passage in the beginning where you talk about your personal journey and how you struggled with your relationship with America as a country. And it's a really beautiful tale you tell about growing up, you know, on the land where so many people had died and toiled as enslaved people. You also talk about how your father was a proud American and how you didn't understand how he could be proud to be American when America seemed to be against him in spite of everything that he did.
Yes.
How did you reconcile that, or did working through this project change your view on how to be American or on how not to be American?
Yeah, absolutely. Working on the project changed my perspective on my father. I opened the piece talking about how my dad, who was born in apartheid Mississippi, flew this flag in our front yard on this giant flagpole. And he was one of the only Black people I knew who flew a flag in their yard, and I was deeply embarrassed by that. But as I started researching for this project, and my essay is really about how Black Americans have had this pivotal role of actually turning the United States into a democracy, I got that he understood something that I didn't, that no one has a right to take away our citizenship and our rights to think of ourselves as American, because so much of what Black people have done is what has built this very country that we get to live in today.
And what do you mean specifically when you say that? Because that was an idea that I don't think I had fully thought about before I read this magazine, was the concept that America's foundation was a lie, in that it was a group of promises that weren't fulfilled, you know, to both people of color and to women in many respects. And what you argue in this magazine is that Black people basically had the job of making it a truth. What did you mean by that?
Absolutely. So when Thomas Jefferson writes those famous English words, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. He owns 130 human beings at that time, including some of his own family members. And he understands that 1/5 of the population will enjoy none of those rights and liberties. So we are founded on a hypocrisy, on a paradox. But Black people read those words and said, oh, we're going to believe that these words are true and apply to us, and fight. Again and again, we see them fighting at the Revolution. The first person to die for this country was a Black man named Christlikeness, who wasn't free. We see that happening with the abolitionist movement, largely led by Black Americans. We see that happening at the Civil War with the Reconstruction Amendments. And of course, the Civil Rights Movement, which brings the franchise to large segments of America for the first time.
Right.
So we said we were founded as a democratic republic, but most Americans could not vote at the time of the Constitution. But thanks largely to Black resistance and freedom struggles, we are as close to a multiracial democracy as we've ever been.
It's a really beautiful story in that it's told not through the lens of anger, but rather through the lens of collecting stories. You know, it's the facts.
I felt a little angry.
A little angry? It doesn't feel like anger
good.
so much as it feels like a truth.
Yeah.
You know? What it has sparked, though, is a fight over history and how the history is told.
Yes.
You know, once this magazine came out, there were many historians who you know, came after you and said, no, this is incorrect. The primary reason that America sought its independence from Britain was not because they wanted to maintain slavery. It was because of taxation without representation. It wasn't the primary cause. Why do you think there's such a resistance to slavery being one of the primary causes of America breaking away from Britain?
Because we need to believe as a country that our founding was pure. That yes, you know, we had some troubles, including holding 500,000 people in bondage, but that largely we were a nation founded to be exceptional and these majestic ideas, and that our founders, though complicated men, were men who were righteous. But when you argue that our founders were, many of them, very hypocritical, and that you can't just simply overlook the fact that slavery was a motivation in some of the colonies. Yes, taxation was a motivation, but also the ability to keep making a lot of money off of human bondage.
Right.
That is very unsettling, not just to the average American, but to historians who have seen their job as protecting that founding narrative. The difference is, you know, when you're Black in this country, you don't have the luxury of pretending that that history didn't exist. And what that history has done is really marginalized our story, when really the story of Black people and slavery is central to the United States.
When you worked through this project, there are new pieces of information you discover. There are stories that you find were never told that need to be told. And I know you can't write about everything, but I was interested in whether or not you would think that other countries who are involved in slavery get off easier than the United States, because the one thing they did differently to America as we know it is that they sort of outsourced slavery. You know, if you think about whether it was the Americas or Spain or many of these other colonial nations, Their slaves were in the countries, and then they left those countries and were like, we're done with slavery. But they also don't have to deal with the people they enslaved. Whereas America has an interesting relationship where you have to deal with the people because they're still here. So not to feel sorry for America, but do you think there's also a reckoning that should happen in this way in Europe, maybe?
Oh, for sure. All the colonial powers need to have a reckoning. And reckoning also needs to happen on the continent of Africa. But I think the fundamental difference, there's two. Yes, slavery occurred in the bounds of the country that would become America.
Right.
But also, of those colonial powers, America is the only country that was founded on the idea of individual rights and liberties.
Interesting.
That was founded on the idea of God-given inalienable rights. None of those other European, I mean, these were monarchies. They weren't founded on the idea that every person had equal rights, but we were. So that hypocrisy really matters. And of course, I argue that that hypocrisy is why we have struggled so much to get over and address the issue of slavery, because it forces us to acknowledge this lie at our founding.
Before you go, one of the main questions many people may have, and you see this unfortunately all too often, is people saying, why do you have to keep drudging this up? Can't we just move on? It's been 400 years now. Can't we just move on? What do you hope would be sparked by the conversations that come from a magazine that delves into slavery like this? What do you want someone who sits at home and says, they go, Nicole, I'm white and I had nothing to do with this and I don't know what you want me to do. What would you hope people take away?
That's a great question. Let me just say, for the record, nobody wants to get over slavery more than black folks. It's not... It's not to our benefit, right? So the fact that our nation can't get over slavery has not benefited black people for a single day. But that's the problem. We've never dealt with the harm that was done. I'm 43 years old, and my father was born into a Mississippi where black people couldn't vote, black people couldn't use public facilities. That was all perfectly legal. We're not far removed from this past at all. And there's never been any effort to redress that harm. So what I hope that people will take from the magazine, every single story in the magazine starts with America today, and shows how these things about American life that you think are unrelated to slavery actually are. And I hope by confronting that truth, maybe we can finally start to repair the harm that was done, and then finally start to live up to be the country of our ideals.
It's a fantastic job, fantastic magazine. Really wonderful having you on the show. Thank you so much. To learn more about this beautiful, amazing story, go to New York.
All right. So I just wanted to share that with you. I was like, you know, the information was so good. I was like, let me share all 10, almost 10 minutes. But yeah, let's get some of your thoughts, initial thoughts.
Bless you. I didn't say it fast enough in the chat.
Thank you. All right, so any thoughts watching that video, feel free to share. Go ahead, Sunflower.
Wow. So, this video reminded me of Black Twitter, because this is literally, wow. It's like, oh my goodness. And you know what's funny? School did not teach me as much as social media did. That's what I'm learning, because all of these things that I know because of social media, not because of school. Because they weren't trying to teach me this. I went to predominantly white schools, ever since my parents tried to move me, because I was fighting and stuff. But ever since they moved me out there, and this is not the same history, that they taught. They didn't teach this. They didn't talk about, Black people literally having America on their back, literally everything that we've built, and then in comes the trauma of also being Caribbean, you know? So this American experience that a lot of people experience is not the same for Black people. And it's so difficult to explain for people, like two people who have
never really had adversity in the way that Black people have had it. And it's something, it makes me, oh my gosh. The way that she goes in, it's like, I knew this stuff, but now it's like, damn, this is something that's never really gonna change. And people are always talking about, oh, it's 400 years. Why can't you get over it? But then we want to talk about Auschwitz and, Jews and Nazis. Like, people are constantly talking about that, but we're not allowed to talk about what we went through. And I don't like that. And even worse, Native Americans, hello, the Trail of Tears, like they went through it. And then when, like, literally these people came from another country and wiped them out, and they're not able to talk about it, but people are able to see that that's something wrong. Like, colonialism is just, ugh. It's so it's so heartbreaking because we see these things that are not supposed to be happening. Exactly, the album. Oh my gosh. It's it just it breaks my heart, as a human, as a Christian, but as a Black person, seeing how other Black people get treated and seeing how if you don't have the information, they will literally dog walk all over you. And that's what they were trying to do by not having us read. Because when you have knowledge, you're able to be like, no, you're not supposed to do that. So they take advantage of the fact that a lot of Black people don't have the knowledge that they should. And it just breaks my heart. But yeah, I'm done. Thank you
Yeah.
for coming to my TED Talk.
Thank you so much, Sunflower. And yeah, as you can see, like, you can still see that she is definitely frustrated by the fact that, like, we almost act like slavery is a thing of the past and has no connection now, when in reality you look at our current system, right? Because this is an oppressive system that, yeah, you may not be on the plantation, but there are other forms of working on the plantation that they have just fooled you long enough to make you think that everybody is free. And when I think about, like, when she talks about the system itself, you look at even the Great Depression. The Great Depression, many people just suffering in terms of suffering economically, and they have something called redlining. And redlining was basically a way to give wealth to whites and discriminate against Blacks and also Latinos as well. And so you have about 70 to 90 years of whites and their generations being able to build up wealth. And because of the redlining, and you can look this up, and there's so many good videos on redlining within our history, so many to explain it, how as Blacks and also Hispanics, Latinos as well, that we were discriminated against. So when you look at even our generations, we're not, I'll just speak as a Black person right now. Many of our generations are not able to make those sacrifices or be able to take risk economically because we were stripped of the opportunity to build up wealth in a number of different areas. While some of our white counterparts may have that opportunity. I'm not going to say every single person because I don't know every single person, but many of them can because, they either were able to benefit off the backs of our hard work and our past generations, or benefit because of they were able to gain wealth through housing and so on. And so you can actually see how these things develop. Even the criminal justice system, how many of our people are in there And granted, if you commit a crime, you commit a crime. But there are a number of crimes that our own people are in there for. And you think about things like the crack epidemic. That when, someone of other complexion, right, would get caught with it, they would get less time. But when one of our people would get caught with it, then all of a sudden they would be in there for years. And so the list goes on of the injustices that have been done for 400 plus years. So thank you so much, Sunflower, for sharing that. Also, Arsha, you're up, and then Stephanie after.
I think, yeah, you pretty much said what I was going to bring up about the redlining. That's something that I actually learned about here, like very, very recently, within the last year, about how there has been this oppressive system to keep Black communities down, essentially. And I feel like it's really important to learn about our history because I feel, I could be wrong, but I feel there are many people who, if they were really honest, and not so much Black people, talking about the others, who believe that slavery was not necessarily bad, who believe that slavery, there were reasons for it, there are justifications for it. And you can see that rationale in how Black people are still treated to today. And a couple of examples that came to mind is I had a conversation with my mom not too long ago, and we were talking about this process of building generational wealth and why is it so hard? Why does there seem to be so many barriers to Black communities moving ahead and moving forward and creating a better future for the children behind them? And what came to mind was because we didn't write the rules. And we're the ones trying to understand and figure out what the rules are. And these rules were designed specifically against us and in favor of people who don't even look like us. So we are always going to be in this space of catching up and trying to understand how to, quote unquote, live that American dream. And a second example that I think about with the pervasiveness of the slavery mentality, we may not be shackled by actual chains, but we are still shackled in many different ways. And I feel in ways that are even more powerful now. In terms of the way Black people talk about themselves and the way that they dress and the things that they believe about themselves. And, you can hold people physically, but when you entrap them mentally, it's game over. That's where you truly have power over people. And I'll never forget a story when I was in medical school and I was taking care of this patient, and there was this Black patient who came in. And she was trying to tell the doctor, hey, I'm not feeling okay. I'm not okay. And everyone was very dismissive. And of course, everyone I was working with was of a lighter complexion. So they didn't really take her concern seriously. Long story short, she ended up coding multiple times. She lost a lot of blood. And at the end of all of this, thank God she still survived at the end of it. But she remembers saying, she's like, I had a feeling something was wrong. And no one took me seriously. And I see this happen over and over and over too many times, to the point where I was in a room full of Caucasian providers, and I'm still a learner, so I don't really have much to say. But I was listening to them talk, and they're just like, yeah, I don't know why Black people just seem to do worse. And it was just this like callous, almost heartless conversation. And I just remember just listening like, wow, like it's still happening even today. Like it's just so ingrained in our system. It's so ingrained in the way that people are trained in the conversation, both said and unsaid. I feel like a lot of the repercussions of slavery are not necessarily things that are verbally said directly. It's in the culture, it's in the nuance. And I even remember as a child, no one ever told me being Black is not good. But I always remember as a kid wishing and praying like, God, I want to be white, because for some reason I felt that being white was better. So it's not necessarily in the messaging, like directly someone telling you that you are not worth, you don't have equal worth to other people of a lighter complexion. It's also the nonverbal and the system and the structure and the infrastructure. And it's ingrained in almost everything, so much so that You don't have to be as loud to say it directly. It's all around us. And we see the devastating repercussions in the news and the statistics and the health and the quality of life and also in the communities of Black people too. But anyways, I'm gonna get off my mini TED talk as well. Okay, bye.
No, I didn't want you to stop. I did not want you to stop. I was like, those are gems right there. Those are gems. And wow, just that realness of, because of our Black experience, right? Days of saying to ourselves, man, there are days I wish I was, there might be others that felt that way. Like, I love being Black, but because of the color of my skin, you may not say it, but I can feel that I'm not wanted. I can feel that I'm not accepted. I can feel that my skin color is seen as a weapon. So I definitely feel that, Arshley, and thank you so much for just being vulnerable and sharing that as well. Let me switch this one up. I'm gonna go with Jerry first, and then come back to Stephanie. Go ahead, Jerry. And hey, bro, good to see you.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't know you were calling me.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
So I needed a moment to like collect my thoughts because this this subject does get me angry. I don't enjoy, particularly talking about it, but we have to talk about it. We have to like discuss it. Um, America is by definition a racist country. Like it was built on other people's backs, and then from their roots stem more racism. And it's like because we're the minority in America, when we speak up about this stuff, um, and because not all white people are racist, but because they don't experience the same things as us, they don't. When we speak up about it, we seem crazy because we're the minority. So it's like I've never dealt with this stuff in my entire life. So what are you talking about? I also grew up poor. I also struggled as well, and I made it just fine. But it's like they have different access than us. They're not what's it called when they're not filtered through like job applications to like housing applications, schools. It, it's really frustrating when you're trying to basically prove your existence in a country that also profits from your experience. It's like it's really frustrating having this conversation. Because again, if you get too angry, you're just an angry person shouting facts that no one else believes. Um, but yeah, we still need to have this conversation. We still need to get ourselves educated. We need facts to like prove ourselves. Doesn't always mean, our facts are gonna be heard, but at least we're actually speaking the truth. We're not making this up. We have documentations, we have history, even though it's being erased every day by like our own government. Oh, sorry. Let me calm down. But yeah, that's more or less of what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and Jerry, I didn't, it's okay to be angry. I wasn't going to tell you to calm down as well at all. I was going to tell you just to continue. It's if other people have a right to show expression and get angry, I don't see why not. We can. There's going to be times where we can get our thoughts together and gather ourselves and say, okay, let me say this more in a calm way. But there are moments when we do need to get angry. There are definitely moments for that. And to say that this is not right. And if you can commit to saying for the rest of your life that this is not right, and I'll be that person that will fight for what's right, then the rest of us can do the same. It's not just one person doing it, but it's us collectively doing it. And as we talk about the 1619 Project and Nicole Hannah Jones, I was really like, I thought what she had said was very beautiful, like all of it, but there's something that really struck me when she spoke about the fact that this country's foundation being built on a lie, right? We know the Declaration of Independence We know these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. What she said about Black people, because she was speaking from the Black American experience, she said for Black people, we were really the ones to hold them to what they put in writing. We were really the ones to hold them to what they put in writing. Because the reality was that they were putting forth promises that were actually lies. And so when us as Black people, we are one of those groups that represent democracy. I didn't say we're the only ones. I said we're one of those groups that represent democracy. Because in times of the civil rights movement, in times of Reconstruction, we always had people that said, listen, you might write these on a piece of paper, but not believe it. But we're gonna hold you to what you wrote. Although there are other places that also had slavery, they weren't the ones to write down and say, hey, we want equal rights for everybody. If anything, they were less hypocritical because they were built on a monarchy. But you're supposed to be built on equal rights, and you're saying one thing, but your actions are totally different. And so I actually love that aspect, that despite the hardship that we went through, despite the pain, despite that, the fact that our people should not have been subjugated to being slaves, we were still able to stand up and say, hey, we're going to hold you to what you put down on paper. Might end up losing our lives. We're going to hold you to what you put down on paper. And so something definitely to celebrate. Stephanie, you're up.
Yeah, I had no idea what, when I saw it, I was like 16, 19. I had no clue what that was. So I'm very happy about this, that I'm aware of this now. And I agree with everything that everybody has already said. And I totally agree that, if you think that we live in a free country, you're kidding yourself, because racism is still alive and well in this country. And I was thinking about this movie that I saw. It was called The Color of Love, and it's based on a true story where this single Christian Black woman, she was a principal of a school, and she had these foster children, and they happened to be Caucasian, and she was trying to adopt them. And the supervisor of the caseworker said no. He didn't want those children to be adopted by this woman. And so she had to go on the media and TV and expose all of this to finally get it overturned, because the children had to actually say to the judge that we've been in different homes with our own, quote unquote color, and they mistreated us, they abused us. And this is the only woman who really showed us love, and we want to live with her. And that's when the judge had to say, you know what, there's no such thing as the color of love. Love is love. Just because you're white or Black or whatever doesn't dictate, And then also I wanted to bring about the point that when I was younger, and I know this could be for a lot of other females, I used to put like sweaters on top of my head and swing it, and wish that I was white. And it's so true. And even when you're going for a job interview, what you put on your resume, and they're impressed by it, but as soon as you walk in, it's a whole totally different story. I'm telling you. And you feel it and you see it, and it's real. Yeah, this really needs to be talked about. It's real.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Jerry, I see your hand up again. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to put it.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure I didn't skip you, man. Yeah, so as we continue this conversation, with those that had just jumped on, we're talking about the 1619 project. And basically, for those that had just jumped on and you're wondering if you missed it, the 1619 project was basically 1619 was a pivotal year when it came to our history. We talk about 1776, Declaration of Independence. You talk about 1776, you can't miss 1619. Many times people want to talk about the Mayflower and, our people, the colonies wanting equal rights and all that, wanting independence. But in 1619, Africans were stolen off of a Portuguese slave ship. And basically colonists from Jamestown, Virginia, exchanged them out for food. And that was the first recorded Africans that were actually in the Americas in 1619. And so even at this country's foundation of the colonies was already built off of a system of racism. And what I do want to read here is some of the places, or some of the some of the institutions that were built on the back of slaves, on the backs of slaves. And I just wanted to share some of these places as I look this up to just research. And I also want to read Tammy's comment in the chat. But places that slaves helped to build. For number one, the White House of Washington, D.C. Slaves helped build the White House. The work began in 1792, and it took 8 years to finish. Originally, there were plans to use workers from Europe, but when that failed, slaves were brought in. They were trained to quarry stone and brick, as well as helping to build the actual structure. Records of wages in 1795 showed that there were at least 5 slaves, 4 owned by the White House architect James Hoban, and 1 owned by his assistant. Hoban earned $60 for each slave each year. In 2016, Arthur Michael Daly estimated the total amount owed in reparations should be $83 million. I also saw like a statistic that simply said that if you were to look at slavery and all the reparations that were owed to Black people, it would be an estimate of $14 trillion. Slaves also built the executive mansion after it burned down in the War of 1812. Here's another one that slaves built, the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. Took more than 30 years to build, from 1793 to 1826. While it's not clear how many slaves helped build it, a 2005 task force found slaves were definitely involved. Okay, as we keep on going here, I'm going to keep on reading. Another thing that slaves built, the Statue of Freedom up top of the Capitol. The Statue of Freedom on top of the Capitol. It's a 19-foot bronze woman holding a sword and laurel wreath. It was made by a slave named Philip Reed. Reed was paid $1.25 a day to cast the statue. He was chosen because no one else had the skill to make a bronze statue out of a plaster cast made by Thomas Crawford. Okay? How about this one? Another thing that slaves built, the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. The Smithsonian Institution, built between 1847 and 1855, is made from red sandstone, which was quarried by slaves. It's thought the slaves were owned by Martha Washington, former President George Washington's wife. Unlike the White House and the Capitol, slaves didn't work on the actual building of the institution. How about this one? Wall Street in New York. Wall Street was named after an actual wall, which slaves built in 1653. There's also used to be a slave market in Wall Street that was one of the largest in the country in the 1700s. Okay. Let me see here. Fort Sumter in South Carolina, that's another thing that slaves were a part of building, based in Charleston Harbor in South Carolina. Fort Sumter is an artificial island that was built in 1829 from bricks that were made by slaves. In 1864, during the Civil War, the Confederate Army made slaves repair the fortress while it was under attack. At least 20 slaves died. How about this one? Harvard Law School in Massachusetts. Harvard Law School, built in 1817, was funded by Isaac Royal Jr. Let me read this one more time. My gosh. Harvard Law School, built in 1817, was funded by Isaac Royal Jr., a slave owner. A lot of his wealth came from the African slaves he had working on sugar plantations and farms. In 2017, the school unveiled a plaque to remember the slavery money that went into the building of the law school. A plaque. A plaque. There are no names for the slaves on the plaque because the identities of royal slaves are not known. Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. In 1838, Jesuit priests who were the founders of Georgetown University sold 272 slaves. It says here, and used the money, which today is worth about $3.3 million, to pay off debts and build its campus. To offset some of the damage in 2016, the university provided preferential administration to the descendants of the slaves who had been sold. I won't go through the rest of these, but just give you some of the other names that slaves built, places that slaves built. The University of North Carolina, of course, in North Carolina. Monticello in Virginia. Okay. Yeah, and those were some of the ones I had here. Obviously, there's more, but just giving you some examples. Sunflower, you're up. Oh, before Sunflower goes, just want to share this. I'm gonna go back to let me see here. I think it was Tammy's comment in the chat. Oh, can we get those factoids? I'm done. This one I can drop in the chat. This was from IBW21.org. So IBW21.org. But I can drop the actual link in the chat as well. But Tammy said from her experience growing up, let me see here. Oh man, y'all were really talking in it. I can't even find it now. It's coming up, don't worry. Okay, here we go. So Tammy says they're definitely not trying to teach this stuff in Florida. I remember when they took our class on a field trip to a cotton field and we picked cotton. I'm floored with like how they're playing in our face and the racism and the discrimination. And these things are all intentional. Imagine bringing black kids to a cotton field and you have them picking cotton. Like, come on. Sunflower, go ahead.
So I'm piggybacking off of what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
It's like taking little black kids to like plantation cottages, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's like taking little Jewish kids to concentration camps. Like that's just poor taste. You don't do that. Oh my, did they really? Oh my gosh. Apparently they did. The plantations. Oh my God. What? See, I didn't know anything about that. That is insane. Wow. So let me just say that the comment in the chat about the towel, I'm so sorry. That's my oh God. Okay, let me put on silent. Okay, so sorry. Um, so the comment in the chat about the towel and the hair and like wanting hair to be it's uh you know, granted, sure I had more opportunities at those schools, but they were horrible. They were horrible. Um, because the white girls there, they would make you feel so bad for being a black girl, you know? they would be like, "Oh, your hair, it looks cute today," and that's how you know that girl, they're making fun of you. They would say things, yeah, they're super, super shady and very passive aggressive. And if you bring it up, you're the angry person because guess what? They said it in a tone that only you understand, but nobody around them does.
Mhm.
So it's being a black girl and going through the whole perm phase, going through the whole you're not gonna see my hair if it's not done phase. It's like it was an obsessive thing with image, and it was so bad because I didn't really have examples besides my family, and my church friends and my people. I didn't really have black girls around me to be like, hey girl, let's talk about hair or you know what I mean? It was just my mom. My mom was doing like with the boogago and the whole, that she was just like doing the Caribbean Haitian bobbles and stuff like that on my hair. And of course, that that made me feel like being black wasn't good. It didn't make me feel good about myself because I was just like, I'm just being me. Why am I getting made fun of? Um, like what is this? And I really had to decenter whiteness. I had to decenter the whiteness that clung on to me from me being in white spaces. And it wasn't until I decentered where I could really focus on loving on myself and loving myself as a Black woman, as a Caribbean woman, and I grew to love my hair so much that I began coloring it myself. I began cutting it because let me tell you, the worst thing for me was me going out the house without my hair done. That's how bad it got. Like I was so self-conscious to the point where if I didn't have my hair done, I don't want anybody to see me. If you saw me, then you better not tell people you saw me or I'll beat you up. Like I was very I was very serious about that image. Like oh my God, the white people, they had me thinking like being Black was raggedy. And I'm like, wow, wow, wow. It's the internalized, like the microaggressions and everything. Like Ashley was saying, yeah. Same thing. I couldn't leave the house without a wig either. It got to a point where if I didn't get a wig that was presentable to me, it would be like World War, whatever, and I couldn't go anywhere. And that's so bad. That's so bad because I should be able to walk outside with my natural hair, not need makeup or lashes or this or that. Like, I should be able to do that. But they had me feeling like I couldn't. And then it just made, like, it did a number on my self-esteem. I really had to not be around them so much so that I can get back to me because I'm like, I've been around y'all too much. It's getting to the point where I am, I don't know, I feel the negativity and you can feel the energy, And when you feel something negative for so long, it starts to do something to your spirit. I couldn't really take it. So it's not like I don't like white people. I just would rather not be so in the white spaces because they don't really like us and they pretend that they do. A lot of them. I'm not saying all white people are like this, but the majority of them are they're ugh, like it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can even say the majority because we don't know the majority.
Well, yeah, not the majority, but for the most part, a lot of them are very close-minded, narrow-minded. They have this thing in their mind where Black people are this, and that's what they think of all Black people. So they believe that we should be mistreated and all of this stuff, and that we're beneath them, And I always I always feel that when they're around because they have this like superiority complex, you know?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that it's definitely okay to be angry, frustrated with the experience that we've had with certain white individuals. I just want to make sure that we don't get to a place where we see them and then and some people will be at this place because they're still growing, right? But we get to a place where we let somebody kind of reveal who they are or where they're at this point in their life in terms of just seeing a skin color and just making an assumption. Because we at that point we would kind of be doing what they do to us, right?
Yeah, that's
So
true.
kind of just being in a place of before I before I just assume, right, that you said something just because you're racist and stuff like that. They actually get to know that person, and then if they're very if you at the end you're like, okay, they definitely are racist. That's another thing. But I'm even realizing the conversations I'm having with white individuals, everybody is not the same. You have somebody that makes a racist comment and they really are racist, they have hatred. Then there's somebody that might make an offensive comment, but they're doing it out of ignorance. And so I'm in a place where I'm ready to have dialogue with you, meet you where you are. There's some people that are not going to do that. They're going to be like, oh, it's not my job to teach you. You've been here and your family's been here for so many generations. And this is the truth about our experience. You just need to learn on your own. And I can't force anybody to teach anybody, but I've been in a place I feel like one of those people called that if I do encounter somebody that is white, a white individual, I'm going to meet them where they are. I'm just going to meet them where they are. And if there's education that needs to be done, I'm going to do it with grace and love because I wouldn't want to do to those people that what was done to me, you know? And what I mean by that is also me giving an example, right? Last week around this time, I was doing this play and we were talking about the play. The essence of the play was to talk about how our Black conferences within SDA, Seventh-day Adventism, came about. Okay. And because of that story, it came about because of discrimination and racism. A lady by the name of Lucy Bayard, she was paying her tithe. She loved her church, her SDA church, and her SDA tithe money went to pay for what they called, it was a hospital back then, but they called it a sanitarium called the Washington Sanitarium. Her tithe paid, the bills, helped pay the bills for that institution. But when it came time for her to get treatment for cancer, she was not welcome at the institution. She was not welcome at that institution. We're good enough to take your money. You're good enough for us to take your money, but you're not good enough for us to treat you. And they also they try to play it off too because they said, oh, well, this is like the white wing. We don't want you to be on this wing. We want you to be on another wing. So our people can feel more comfortable. So that's how it really ignited like our separate conferences, Black and white conferences and so on. That was kind of started it. But there were other things happening where Blacks felt like they weren't getting enough rights and everything. And so I wrote a play and directed it last week, and we're able to do that and kind of talk about the story and the events that talked about discrimination. There were other stories, but this was just one of many where Blacks felt like we are not seen and we are not heard. One of the people that attended, because the director, me and him, it's a white the director of the music conference, I should say. Me and him have been working together for 2 years now. And when I tell you he is an ally, he gets it, I truly mean it. He doesn't just say it out loud. Behind closed doors, he's preaching this thing as well. And so we've worked together. He said to me, Devonte, sometimes I just see this is him. Sometimes I just don't understand our people. He's like, and by what his people, he meant like his Caucasians. He's like, one of them came up to me, older couple, and they said, we don't think we'll be coming back next time because the program didn't really speak to us. And I had to laugh and I told him, well, you're learning about Black history and what people have gone through. Of course, it's not going to speak to you, but what it should speak to you, it might not speak to you in terms of I've gone through this, but it should speak to you to say that, wait a second, these are our people. This is what they endured. Let me open my eyes. Let me be a part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. But it was just like, not everything's about you. And that's the point. When most of your life, not saying that people don't go through challenges, when most of your life is living the life of the privileged and not the downtrodden, you get a sense of, I've made it. You get a sense of, what are they talking about? You get a sense of this airiness to you that, because I personally have not gone through it, it means that what they're talking about is not a reality. And so I just thought it was so interesting. Like, everything that you see is not always going to be about you, but they had that mindset. But I'm going to share with you one of the videos back then, or one of the videos we did last week of a bus scene with a lady called Irene Morgan. And Irene Morgan, she was basically an Adventist woman, a Black Adventist woman, who was the Rosa Parks before Rosa Parks. And since we're talking about 1619, the first African slaves to touch down at the start of the colonies, the first African slaves to be in the Americas, happened in Virginia. Irene Morgan ended segregation on buses in Virginia as well. And it actually happened about 15 years before Rosa Parks. Even before Claudette Colvin, which was before Rosa Parks, Irene Morgan was the Adventist woman that actually helped to end segregation on buses. So before I share that with you guys, I did see some hands. So Natalie, and then Ruthie. Oh, you good on Ruthie? Okay, I thought I saw your hand. Okay.
Earlier I had just wanted to talk about like the hair thing. And hair is like always something I struggled with. And now when I look back, like now I feel like more comfortable like wearing my natural hair, even though it's like short and stuff. But it was really like I would have rather wear a wig that looks completely different from my hair, that's on my forehead and looks crazy, than just like to live in myself, live in my own body. And like I also felt like growing up, other Black people made you feel bad for your own natural hair. They'd be like, "Oh, your hair's too nappy," and "Oh, your hair is so hard to comb through." And it's just like it makes me sad that these words are repeated by our people, because it was like taught to us by other people that we shouldn't love ourselves and our hair. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for that as well. And absolutely. This thing is so multifaceted. It almost feels like, where do we begin? Between what the oppressor does, between what we do to each other. It's just, it can be a lot. Sometimes you need some relief from it, but just like how our ancestors, and even people within the civil rights movement and so on, there's always been people that have fought to say, this might have happened over the last 200 years, but we're not willing to let it continue. We're going to fight to make sure that we continue to fight for those equal rights. We've accomplished some things, but there's still so much more that we can achieve as well. Let me share this video with you all. And I thought I would share this one because Katie Ann is in it as well. And I found I found it very powerful, but it was also very telling. It's something that is not only of the past, but also based on what we presently go through as well. So this is the story of Irene Morgan, and hope you enjoy it.
But do you know about Miss Irene Morgan?
Hello, Have you heard of me? Why, I'm Irene Morgan. I'm married. I have 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl. Actually, I have 3 children, but I lost my child to a miscarriage. It's been so hard. Sometimes I didn't know how I was going to get through this if it wasn't for my community. See, I was born in Gloucestershire, Virginia. Why, my family's been there since the 1800s. We really stuck together, and they helped me through this whole ordeal of a miscarriage. Child, I'm talking to you. I forgot I have a bus to catch. And by the way, where is this bus? It's gonna make me late. Oh, there it is. We'll have to talk later here. Sir?
Thank you.
Oh, why is there never any seats on this bus? May I sit here? There's never any seats on this bus. Thank you.
Baby. Oh, my bus is here. Come on, baby. Okay. Good morning, bus driver. How you? Here's my ticket.
Thank you.
Okay, baby. Let's get us a seat. Good morning. Oh, thank you, Jesus. Oh, Lord, have mercy. Oh, God, girl, don't cry on this bus.
Hi. Is that your child?
It is. Her name is Kavanaugh, and she's 3 months.
Oh, why, what a beautiful baby.
Oh, thank you. Do you have any children?
I do. I have 2 children, but I just had a miscarriage, and I lost my son.
Oh,
it's been so hard.
Oh, honey, you know, these things, they happen all the time. I am so sorry. Now,
Irene is sitting 2 rows from the back. Just as the driver puts the bus in gear, a white passenger rushes in and they start looking up and down the bus.
So where you headed? To Baltimore. Oh my God, you have such a long trip, girl.
Yeah, my husband with my family, we have to do a miscarriage.
I am so sorry. You know, a lot of women, they have miscarriages and they don't want to talk about it. I know. What does man want?
You're gonna have to go and move to the back.
Oh, there's a white woman. We gotta go, girl.
Wait, sit down. Where are you going? We paid our fare. Sit down.
Oh, Lord, have mercy.
Excuse me, we've gotta go. I need you to go to the
Yes,
back.
sir. Irene, girl, you better come on.
Excuse me, ma'am. If you don't get up now, you will have to get off the bus.
I paid my fare, and I'm not getting up.
Well, if you don't get up, I will have to get the police.
Well, then you will just have to get the police.
Irene, he's gonna get the police.
I paid my fare, and I'm not getting up. I paid my fare, and I'm not getting up.
Lord have mercy, here he coming, the police, Jesus. Help me, Jesus. Irene, get up, girl. Oh, Lord. Oh, Father God, in the mighty name of Jesus.
Woman,
Holy Ghost.
you gotta go.
Where and why?
Ma'am, we're telling you, you need to leave this bus right now.
I paid my fare, and I'm not getting up.
We got a warrant for your arrest right here.
It has your name on it right here.
Well, you will just have to arrest me not getting up.
We know how to handle that. Let's go.
Oh, she done. Oh my
Getting
God.
up.
Let's go. Do not resist. Do not resist.
She kicked him in the nuts. Oh, she done did it now. Oh, Lord.
Crazy lady, man.
Father, we got him.
Let's go.
Yeah, we better get up before
After
we get
this,
arrested too.
Irene finds herself in a lonely county jail for the next 7 hours. The charges are resisting arrest and violating Virginia public transportation laws. Through the whole ordeal, Irene said she had no fear. Her mom bailed her out with a $5 bond. Irene Morgan appears before a Middlesex County Circuit judge, representing herself with no legal counsel.
Miss Irene,
Your Honor,
Mrs. Irene Morgan, I fine you $100 for resisting arrest and $10 for violating Virginia public transportation statute.
Your Honor, I will pay the $100, but I won't pay the $10. I will take this case to the Supreme Court of the United States.
Oh, really? Well, good luck then.
God is on my side. It took 2 long years for me to fight for justice. God was on my side. The NAACP, they helped me. And a young, brilliant lawyer by the name of Thurgood Marshall took my case all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. They ruled in my favor 6-1. God was on my side. Did I tell you? I'm Christian. I believe in God. But more importantly, I'm a woman. I'm black, strong. And I don't play.
So I thought I would leave that with you all for today. And as we talk about the 1619 project, we conclude part 1 for today, right? Yeah. That was one of the funniest third good. That was one of the funniest yeah, Kay. I was like, she's so dramatic. She's so dramatic, but it worked. Yeah, stand on business. Go ahead. So just want to say, as we conclude part 1 for today, we talk about the 1619 project. As we think about democracy, as we think about equal rights, there's no one, if America's really going to follow what they truly preach, right? There's no one more that embodies that than our Black people. The fight for democracy, the fight not just for words written on a paper, but for the reality to be seen that all people, we know these truths to be self-evident, that everyone is created equal, right? The fight for that never stops. As long as we're on this side, and until we get to heaven, we need to continue to fight for those equal rights, not just for ourselves, but just like there are those that have helped us get this far. We want to make sure that we even give a better future to our kids, to our future generations, however long that we're still on this planet, you know. And so I just want to just say thank you for, you know, having this conversation with us. We're going to get ready to close out and then go into Afterglow. I will stay with you a little bit for Afterglow, but today I'm also going to be supporting one of my friends. He's leaving our previous internship. Well, I left already, but he's leaving, and so he asked me to come and support him. And so let's get ready to close out. And I just want to just share with you on this last thought. But as we think about not only people in society that have made a way for us, we continue to think of, even biblically, that the Bible is also Black history as well. The Bible is also Black history as well. And so Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro, African wife of Moses, bore him 2 sons and rescued his life from divine judgment when she circumcised her son, a task that belonged to Moses. His life was actually at risk then. We also have Simon of Cyrene, who helped Jesus via Dolorosa. Remember that song? Was of African descent. This we know because Cyrene is a country in North Africa. You can find this scripture in Matthew 27:32. He was compelled by the Romans to carry the cross of Christ to his crucifixion site. This means that the first person to follow behind Jesus, bear his cross, and have Christ's blood run off on him was a Black man. This is the spiritual posture of discipleship God calls all believers to have as we identify with Christ and his suffering. And of course, we spoke about Jethro as well. So whether it was Black history in society, Black history within your family, or Black history in the Bible, we belong, we matter. And the God that loves all of humanity loves us as well and wants us to be seen and also heard. So we ask that you bow your heads and close your eyes right before we go into Afterglow. Heavenly Father God, thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for bringing light to this 1619 project. Whether it was reviewable information, God, whether it was new information for some of us, God, the main point is that we never forget how you have led us in the past. And as we move towards our future, that we never forget the evil's done. Not for us to walk around bitter or to try to get back at people, but we remember that if it was done in the past, help us to remember that it needs to be put to a stop even now if it's still continuing. Whether it's mass incarceration, whether it's still discrimination when it comes to purchasing homes, God, whether it's the look that we get from the cop that shows that I'm tolerating you, but I really don't want you here. Whether it's relationships where we're being judged just because of the color of our skin, because we're darker than somebody. Whether it's a statement of being called lazy when no one's taking into account about the intergenerational trauma that a lot of our families have experienced as Black people. Help it to stop here. Let it be the place that it stops here. Help us to start with our homes and help us to continue throughout society and our churches. That even though we experienced this, it's coming to an end now. We say this all in your name, and we praise you, God, for being so good to us. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. All right, as we start off Afterglow, I'm going to stop this recording really quickly.